Well, Indians have called for a boycott on Chinese goods, and the Indian government has pledged to block investment and increase tariffs for China after a deadly border clash in the Himalayas that left 20 Indian soldiers dead and another 76 injured. Jagannath Panda is an expert in India-China relations. He joins me now out of New Delhi. Jagannath, this is not new in India, but how much has the recent spike in violence on the border contributed to this sentiment?
Oh, it's a huge setback for India because Indian public, Indian government did not really expect this to happen at this particular time, at a time when the whole world is actually fighting COVID-19. And if you see from the beginning, from November, January onwards, except India, entire world has condemned China on the COVID-19. India has not really commented on China on the COVID-19. So it's a serious setback if India takes into consideration what PLA is currently doing in the India-China boundary regions. This is certainly not expected, and the killing of the 20-plus soldiers on the Indian side is actually a huge, huge message to the Indian public that China is a suspect power, and we should not really forget that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Modi to respond in some way. How critical is trade as part of that response?
I think if you see last 2 decades or so, trade and economic contacts has always been the stabilizing factor in India-China ties. And if you see when Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping met, they did term this bilateral relationship under the development partnership. That means trade and economic ties was supposed to be the key factor in bringing out peace and tranquility between the two countries. But that's unfortunately not happening at this moment. After this border incident, I think there is a huge national sentiment in India to boycott the Chinese goods. And there is a national sentiment is currently emerging to make India's economic policy self-reliant, not to rely on the China, ban the Chinese goods, and take necessary steps which would actually be not in favor of China. For example, we would be really considering how to really, whether to welcome Huawei at any point in future or not. I think there will be a serious review about Huawei taking part in the 5G technology. The illegal goods which is coming to the Indian market, not only directly, but also through the third country channel, that would be really, reviewed. And the most important thing is the trade deficit, which China is not willing to address.
Yeah, and which is huge in favour of China. China, though, is quick to retaliate, as Australia has found out, when it is challenged or even questioned. What sort of repercussions might be if there are moves to really in some way constrain China?
I think the Chinese are showing deliberate aggressive nature for a greater bargaining with India, but I think this is a serious strategic mistake on the part of the Xi Jinping administration. I think if we try to understand China's Belt and Road initiatives, India was a greater market for the Chinese goods, for the Chinese business communities, despite of the fact that India is the only country which has not really supported the Belt and Road initiatives, and India has taken a firm position on the Belt and Road initiatives from the beginning. Despite of that, I think there was a narrative emerging between India and China to cooperate on specific sector, for example, on infrastructure development, on connectivity issues, which are of bilateral nature, or welcoming the Chinese companies to Indian domestic market and vice versa. But unfortunately, I think after the Galwan incident, when the soldiers have died, I don't think there will be a return on this kind of narratives from Indian side at least. So there is a strong anti-China narrative is emerging, and I think China is going to take a serious note of it. But it's a serious mistake on the part of the Xi Jinping administration.
Yeah. Tell me, is there a discussion going on in India about its reliance on China? It's something that Australia is obviously thinking about itself, given the response we've had. We've had sanctions on a number of our exporting industries. Do you think more globally we need to rethink how dependent we've all become on China?
I think one would agree that in an interdependent world, complete decoupling from China would not really be possible. And it won't be possible because when India is an immediate neighbor of China, and there are actually stronger connections at the ground level still exist. not only directly at the bilateral level, but also at the regional levels. But I think after this particular incident, after COVID-19, the kind of international narrative is emerging against China. There is an alternative scenario would be first emerging. Let's take the let's take into consideration Donald Trump's call to expand the G7 narrative. Now, all this while, G7 narrative was all about industrialized democracies. It's about developed economies. But for the first time, India has been invited to be a part of the expanded G7 narratives. Similarly, if we talk about UK is talking about D10, democratic 10, to boycott the Huawei from the 5G technology. India is a critical part of that. And if we talk about India-Australia relations, I think there is a lot of things is happening. And just 2 weeks back, we developed our relationship into a comprehensive bilateral ties. So there is a interest on the part of India to maximize its economic, trade, and strategic ties with the greater economies in the regions, in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think India is in favor of an alternative narrative in the global politics. And this is what I think we'll be increasingly seeing India moving away from China increasingly in coming future.
Yeah, very fascinating. Really good to talk, Jagannath. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.